Hello, 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 my friends. Thank you for stopping by and thanks for hanging out. My name is Jason, and this is the Outstanding Life Show. We talk about mental health, we talk about addiction, we talk about recovery and mindfulness. These are all very big topics, and they they can mean different things to different people. But this conversation, this ongoing episodes that we're putting out are related to addiction, and it's about struggling with. And I can't just narrow it down to saying specifically alcohol. There are there have been people who have watched the show. Either they watched the Facebook Lives or they caught the replay on YouTube or they listened to the podcast. And that could be you, whether you're listening to this now or watching this now. But there's been people who have watched the show in the past, they've listened to it, and they've reached out to me and they've let me know that based on some of these conversations that we had, it's offered additional insight. Someone mentioned to me that they were struggling with a separation and they'd been with their partner for quite some time, and it listening to this show helped offer some context of having empathy and being mindful in our approaches, being empathetic to ourselves and other people. I had somebody reach out to me last week and they shared that they they were going through a challenge and they found their higher power after years of going to meetings, and they were really excited to share, and we were able to catch up and have a conversation, and it was heartwarming, it was reassuring, and it's that feeling you get when you can jump into a conversation with somebody and maybe you haven't had a conversation with them in quite some time, and it can help rejuvenate you, it can help spark that energy. And maybe it's because you just ran a marathon. Maybe it's because there's a lot of news out there that's very enticing, very exciting, and it can be anxious. It can spark anxiety and certain things when you jump into a conversation after you've had that fight or flight, and then when you throw yourself into a conversation, that that can carry into your conversation. One of the steps that comes from the 12-step program is identifying that there's a problem. The first stage is awareness. And the other steps, not to be too I don't want to reduce the steps down to like a handful of things, but there's always identifying that there has been a problem or that there has been an issue. We talk about it in the past in one of our previous episodes where we've talked a lot about identifying what part of ourselves is experiencing that emotion. What part of ourselves is feeling this way? What part of ourselves is feeling hungry, angry, lonely, and tired? We've called that before HALT, HALT, the acronym. And with HALT, I use that as a way of this is kind of how I'm able to map my emotions. And when I start feeling sensations, when I start feeling emotions, and when those emotions add up and they start stacking up in 2020, stacking emotions comes out of nowhere. In 2020, things can go 0 to 60 really quick. If I watch the news for any length of time, I'm going to get anxious. I'm going to feel an emotion or 20 in a span of a couple of minutes. And it's a roller coaster out there. So being able to identify my emotions can definitely help me. And we've talked before about the acronym HALT, and we've talked before about the feeling of anxiety. But what I haven't talked about is the Tony Robbins would call it, what is the code word? And Tony Robbins is I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. I've been to his events. Uh, Here, I think here in Calgary, he's been here 3 times, and it's been an amazing experience to see him every time. And I flew to New York, and I was able to walk on fire, and these things are really cool. These experiences, I've watched his videos on YouTube. I've read his books. I've bought the DVD box sets. But when you go to an event and you can experience it, you can anchor those emotions, you can anchor those feelings to an event, and somehow it made it real. Somehow it made it like it was no longer something that I read in a book one time or flipped through a magazine. And you're on an airplane and you flip through a magazine, you see Tony Robbins, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's that guy. That's always a positive motivation. It becomes a real event when you can anchor that experience to something. These emotions no longer are just emotions; they become something because I'm giving it life. The Deepak Chopra would talk about, the world is brought forth as much by the mind as it is the world. That you're almost co-creating the universe, the events that are happening to us as we experience them. And Dr. Wayne Dyer, he would he would his I really like his he has this idea about if you change the way you're looking at something, what you're looking at then changes. And when I experience the world as it currently is, if I were to take things as face value, when I watch the news, it's very easy for me to get upset and angry and frustrated and resentful. If I live my day and if I have an expectation as to how my day is expected to go, and it doesn't go that way, it, the world's going to happen regardless of how I feel about it. And the message of today's show, the message is I'm not saying it's about expectation and to put my expectations to the side, but my perception of the world can have a great impact on how I internalize those emotions, how I internalize the external events to the internal world, and then how I label those as emotions can generate these feelings. And those feelings can then be anxiety, frustration, resentful, and negativity. And then how I respond to those emotions. So there's a whole cascade of events that combine that then add up to my day. And in yesterday's episode, we talked about the weather changing so much here in Calgary, where from 10 minutes, it could be 20 degrees outside, and then it could be minus 20 by afternoon. It's bonanza out there. There's Chinooks and there's all sorts of weather changes. And so just like the weather can change outside, so too can the emotions inside. And any one of those factors layered in, I can shift my perspective of an event. I could shift how I internalize and label that event. I could shift and change how I respond to those events. In each of those things, if I were to just live in a knee jerk reaction world, if I lived in that hype of just watching news 24/7, I'm probably going to be very, um, what is it? I'm just going to be hypertensive, or I'm just waiting for the opportunity to be angry, or I'm waiting for the chance to be upset, angry, frustrated, and resentful. And then that's the purview that I'm looking in the world. If I'm looking for something to fit in this round hole, the only thing that's going to fit is the round hole. If I'm a hammer and I perceive myself as a hammer, I'm looking for nails. And then that's all I'm ever going to see. That's my experience of the world. I can only succeed then by failing. And that's where I don't want to say that's where addiction comes from, but in the mental health perspective, if my view of my world of addiction, and I never knew what recovery could do for me, or maybe I was aware of it, but I didn't appreciate it, or I wasn't open to the idea of recovery, the world will be perceived as something that's ominous. It's going to be perceived as something that's daunting. It's going to be perceived as something unknown, almost fearful. And it's going to be perceived as something that's like overbearing. It's almost too much. I can't solve that. If I can't have the whole ocean, I don't want to drop. And these linear approaches to life, if I reduced my perspective down to that tunnel view, everything is going to be an opportunity to be upset. Everything is going to be an opportunity to be frustrated and resentful. And that's never a successful day. Like, no days are going to be good. I I talked before about, we can have. Oh, I was in treatment, and one of the counselors I was talking with, we had to make friends with the counselors. I mentioned in yesterday's episode where, in order to move up through the stages as the weeks went on, you had to make friends with more and more counselors. And there's this one counselor, and he had this idea, and it blew me away. His idea was, Jason, you can have a bad minute, and you can even have a bad hour. Like, you can have bad hours. That's going to happen no matter what. No matter how positive you are, you're going to have a bad hour. And then his approach was, I could have a bad minute and I could have a bad hour, but there's no way that I could have a bad day. And so his approach was that there's no such thing as a bad day. I can give these emotions a whole day, but these bad minutes, they can add up to maybe a bad hour, but having a bad day is going to be something where I'm really committed to having a bad day. And I'm not saying situations are going to change in a bad day. What his idea was, I'm not going to let this rule my life to the point where, I'm going to fester in this moment for a minute. I might give it an hour, but there's no way that I'm going to give it all day. And he even made a joke, and he was saying, there are people, Jason, who will have not only a bad hour, they'll have a bad day, they'll have a bad month, and some people will even have a bad year. And in if I look back at like this year of 2020, I wonder how many people have had bad months, and they're probably legitimately having a bad year. Everybody is. But I'm laughing, not in respect of out of what's happened so far, but this was 8 years ago when I was having this conversation, and it's more relevant now more than ever. So these lessons that I've picked up, these conversations I've had about reframing, about manifesting. Deepak Chopra talks a lot about manifesting. Manifest your destiny. And I never thought that there was any meat or sustenance to these things. But I look back now, and in my addiction, I only ever looked and I measured success weekend to weekend, like payday to payday. And I lived and breathed and died in month to month increments and 2 week increments. And that was my measurement of success. It was how many times could I get drunk and how many times could I go out, and how many times would I be broke at the end of that. And it would just be a never ending cycle. I found myself associating with people that weren't necessarily supportive of a healthy mindset, of a healthy lifestyle. And when you surround yourself with conditions like that, the chances of success of getting out of those get smaller and smaller the longer that you're there. I heard this statistic that there's whole communities out there that will talk you out of great success. They'll talk you down. And I got to the point where, in my addiction, in my active addiction, where I surrounded myself with people who wanted no more, they demanded no more. They didn't have any high expectations or standards for themselves. They weren't in a position to try to be better. There was no will or desire. There was no higher power. There was no steps. There was no sponsors. There was no meetings. And when I look back at that, I probably spent the large majority of my life just sitting in that idle mode. And when I didn't get the life that I wanted, I saw this quote, and it was, "Don't be upset at the life you don't have for the work you have never done," or something to that effect. And it really spoke to me. It really knocked me back. I think this is where my, when you when you do a Google search and you're like positive mindset or changing my life, there's no higher person that shows up on the list other than Tony Robbins. And I started consuming his content at a young age. I started reading uh, Dale Carnegie, and then Spencer Johnson. These are all Who Stole My Cheese. You ever read that book where it's like these two mice, and they have these idea about the world, and in one mouse, he's all upset because in the maze that they live in, he runs around and he finds a big chunk of cheese. And he's all excited because he keeps eating the cheese every day. But then one day he wakes up and he's eaten so much cheese that he doesn't know what to do. And his world is over and he sits there and he wallows. And then there's the other mouse. He's made an adventure where he goes out and he finds excitement in looking for cheese. Like the adventure is looking for the cheese, not actually finding the cheese. And then he makes it a habit of getting out there and doing the searches and having the successes and celebrating the wins. And then he moves on when he doesn't experience wins, when he experiences loss. And I thought that was a good parable for, if I'm not doing the work, if I'm holding myself down, if I'm reframing my losses and my negativity, it's easy for me to be upset, angry, frustrated, and resentful. It's easy for me to give in to my situation or my circumstances. That's a better way of saying it. Like my current circumstances are always going to be upsetting, just to some extent, right? Like there's always moments where you could be angry, you could get upset, you could be negative about something. There's another book that I really enjoy, and it's Principles by Ray Dalio. And the audiobook that he has is even better because it's him reading it. There's two parts to the book. One part is like business, like crazy business talk. But then there's the other half of the book, Principles, where it's life. And it's the same principles from the business side, but then run towards in the life format. And then his like just the way he talks, and it makes it so clear. Imagine if you were wrong. In the book, Ray Dalio will say, you're not wrong, but imagine you were wrong. How would you be wrong if you were wrong? And it introduces the concept of brevity, like being mindful that yes, but you also need to be willing to save yourself if you're wrong. And in that moment, what would you do when you're wrong? And you start planning for it. Like you're not willing it to go wrong, but you're not festering in your wrongness, but you're exercising that part of your brain to believe that there's a chance you could be wrong. And when you are wrong, here's what you're going to do. You're going to own up to it. You're going to move on. You're going to take your lessons, and you're going to do something to help prevent that from happening in the future. There's protocols. There's now standards you're holding yourself to. And then so the book Principles is there to help. There's no way you're going to take your life from 0 to 60 overnight. You're not going to change everything that's wrong in your life if there was a list of things. But what you could do is you can have a guiding set of principles to help narrow that focus so that if you have 50 things that are wrong in your life, you're just going to focus on the top 3 of them. And you're going to set motions and put plans, make make commitments to work on those three consistently. And then after a while, it's going to add up to a lifestyle. So Ray Dalio, I'm digging that book. I really enjoyed it. I always go back to it at least once a year, but it's helped me shift my focus. And if there's what I'm harping on the most here is, yes, there are horrible things that happen in life, and yes, there are unspeakable things that are happening even today, like right now. There's horrible things that have happened to me in my past and even in my childhood, but I don't want those things to rule my life forever. And for the longest time, I did. And I reached out for help and I've gotten support. We've mentioned that before in the past. I've got counselors. I've been to meetings. I've signed up for groups. I've done. There's quite a few things that I've done to help get me that support and to find that sense of community. But when but when you don't have somebody to talk with, that's a horrible feeling. When you don't have that idea that something could be different and you think every day is exactly the same and you keep living the pattern over and over and over again and you surround yourself with a community that talks you down and you don't have that supportive community, just like we talked about yesterday about, it's important to have that accountability group. It's important to have a sponsor. There's a lot of good that comes from that community. Is the community the solution by itself? No. Having a supportive community can definitely help, but that's one of the key pillars, but it's not everything. When it comes to mindfulness and recovery, addiction, resilience, and I was talking with my friend Barbara, and then we were chatting about, the resilience is something that you have before the event crisis takes place. Everybody can grow in the moment that you experience that trauma. And having that flexibility, having that foundation, having that groundwork already laid, and then when the event crisis takes place, and there's going to be horrible things that happen, there's going to be challenges that arise, but having that resilience in place beforehand, not only does that show you that you have that constitution where you have that strength, if you've been through A, B, and C from a challenge perspective, you look back and those are almost badges of courage where I've been through this. I've been through horrible things. And if I can do that, I can do those great, amazing accomplishments and those horrible things that have happened. I've now framed them in my mind as accomplishments and tasks. And these are things that took years to sow the seeds, to nurture, and to grow into something constructive, to move me into a place of power, to move me from the victim mindset to I've moved into a contributor where I feel like I'm contributing now to help with growth, to help with challenge and adversity. And through reframing these events, through reframing these challenges, I've been able to change my perspective of those events. But then when that gets to the internalizing component, where I start to process those events, when I start to process, and I don't want to say come to terms, but if I'm no longer labeling the things that happen in the world as bad and negative, and yes, there are things that are detrimental and horrible, but if I'm not eager to jump on that bandwagon, to be anxious and to label and dismiss, because I don't want to round down and I don't want to, kind of like what Yoda says, where you got to be careful about the dark side. You got to be careful about giving into that, because that's what leads to those other layers of stress. Those are what lead to the other layers of anxiety, frustration, and resentment. At the beginning of this, we started talking about the code words, and Tony Robbins would call it, if you're feeling this, what is the code word underneath it? And I was watching this podcast with Tim Ferriss, and Gabor Mate, and he was talking about this story where he was supposed to get some work done in his house, and he paid somebody to do the work, and then the guy was supposed to show up on a specific day and a specific time, and he never did. And then Tim Ferriss was saying he was angry about it. And then Gabor was asking him, well, why did you feel that way? And he's like, well, I was just angry. Gave him the money and he didn't show up. And he's like, well, what part of you is feeling that anger? And he's like, well, I don't know. And then as they talk longer about it, Tim Ferriss reveals that deep down he felt as if he wasn't worth the time or the effort or the energy, and he felt unworthy, and that somebody else was more worthy than him. And there was underlying concerns about not attention, but it became of self-worth. And I was blown away by that him revealing this. And Gabor then, once he got him to that guided conversation, once Gabor was able to unveil that, he was sharing with Tim, he's like, if it's self-validation, if it's self-worth, the great part about that is regardless of what somebody else does or says, we determine our own self-worth because we have that chance of putting a new label on it, regardless if somebody gives us that time and regardless if somebody gives us that energy. And it was more of a healing conversation than anything. And I was blown away by this. I was like, holy crap, Gabor Mate just schooled Tim Ferriss on, he was angry about somebody not showing up. And it was something simple. And I was like, holy crap, that's amazing. Like, I need to start reframing some of these things. I need to dust off my appreciation fan book here. I have a gratitude list. I focus on it and I write consistently. I go and I keep compiling this and I keep adding to it. But what Gabor Mate was talking about was not so much just taking that gratitude list, but not being afraid of these feelings and emotions that we experience, because they can help reveal that code word underneath. It can help create that pattern, because we're still going to have these emotions. These emotions are going to be true and raw, and they're going to be there. What Gabor was mentioning was like using that key as a map, using those emotions as a key. And then that helps pinpoint the emotional map. And over a long period of time, you can start mapping out where those true emotions underlying are. And that can help create a picture about, there might be a larger issue at hand. There might be a larger concern that needs addressing. What I used to stuff my emotions, and I used to avoid responsibility. I would avoid conversations, and instead I would do things like I would go and buy a new iPad or buy a new luxury item. And I was using this as a way of just masking my emotions and masking the conversation, and avoiding it, trying stuffing my anxiety. But it never solved anything. An iPad never solved anything. It didn't make me feel better. Buying a new pair of shoes doesn't change me as a person. If what I wanted was that validation, and if what I wanted was being recognized as a contributor, another way to get that feeling is through contribution and care. Caring for myself and caring for other people. Buying an iPad isn't going to change that. Buying shoes doesn't change it better. Nice jeans or whatever that is for you. But for me, consuming and purchasing these items, I found a means of escape. And alcohol and addiction can manifest itself in more than one way, not just through alcohol. This is huge. Like this topic goes deeper and wider than anything. And so the same answer for you is not always the same answer for me. And this is where the talks of mental health comes in, because these are the I don't want to call them the challenges of mental health, but these normalizing the conversations and the mental health awareness week. That my number one downloaded podcast episode is Mental Health Awareness Week. And it floors me that, well, it kind of makes sense, but of all the topics we talk about and of all the things we dig into, mental health is something that everybody is aware of. And not that it's just a buzzword, but just identifying what that is at the surface level can help paint that underneath language where we can start internalizing, start understanding, and then start approaching those underlying concerns. And it's okay to not have everything under control. And it's okay to have bad days and bad minutes. As long as we don't have a bad year, I think, I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to make it. My friend, I was chatting with my friend Amanda, and then we were chatting about, it was like going to the gym, and I was complaining. I was like, I've had it. I've got a cheat meal. I got to admit to you, I've had a cheat meal. And she goes, Jason, that's okay. Having a cheat meal, it's not gonna, we're not gonna break the bank with a cheat meal. You're fine. It's when you have a cheat week and you have a cheat month, and then if you're having a cheat year, 2020 is gonna be it could be a cheat year. But I was eating so much candy from Halloween that I was like so sick and tired of candy by the end of the week, and there's still a whole bunch of candy. We didn't have that many trick or treaters. But my friends, this has been an adventure. This has been fun. I've been sharing about understanding emotions and reframing and taking that challenge, taking that event crisis point that happens to us, and is there another way that that could be labeled? Is there another way we could be perceiving it? And I'm not saying it in a dismissive way. I'm saying that from, is there some other outside factor that would also create that outcome? Or is this the only way to perceive that event? And is that the only way I can internalize it? And then is that the only way I can, I don't want to say compose it, but if I'm only appreciating the world in one way, is that the world's fault or is that what I'm bringing to the table? And if I could be wrong, how would I be wrong? And is there another way I could perceive it? These are all fun conversations. These are all adventurous. Again, the same answer for you is not the same answer for me, but I wanted to introduce this conversation. And I really hope you're enjoying this. I'm having fun with these, and I hope that's carrying through the audio or the video. I've been gathering the conversations you're sharing with me and you're having with me. I've been doing something else. Hold on, I want to show you something. If you're watching the video, at the bottom of the screen, I've got a link and it's got sobriety.live/now. And if you go to that, it brings you to, oh, hold on, I've got a link here. It brings you to a page, and I've got everything from how to, if you want to reach out by, if you're a Facebook person, because maybe not, you don't have Instagram or whatever, there's a Facebook link. There's a way to get a hold of me by snail mail or email. I've got a link to the podcast in case you're an audio person. Because if you like audio, maybe you just want to listen to this and you don't want to watch it. Or if you're a video person, go ahead and check out the Facebook Live. I've got the links all there. And I've also got the blog version of everything. So I've got the blog, I've got the audio, I've got the video. It takes a little bit of work to get all this organized, but there is some other bonus stuff here. And this stuff's really cool. If you like calm.com, we've got a link to 30 days. So I just give that to you. That's a gift from me to you. I get no benefit from this. So it's completely free for you. And then there's Coursera certificates because Coursera is offering courses until the end of the year. And some of those courses are related to mental health. These things are huge and they're taught by amazing instructors. I've been signing up to them. I've been taking my, even the Mental Health Commission of Canada, they've got mental health courses as well. And that's totally, you can sign up to them. They're all by Zoom. Even meditation, if you like meditation, there's peaceinside.live. Those guys are cool. Anyway, my friends, thank you so much for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out, being a part of the conversation. If you're enjoying this, let me know. Put the hearts, put the stars, put the comments. Thanks again for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. Or if you're listening, thanks for listening to the audio. Bye, everybody.